Welcome back to another Nvidia update. Today we have some cool things to cover. First, we have Amazon. The company just reported earnings, and let me just be honest, I don't think there was anything too bullish for Nvidia from the Amazon earnings call. We're going to look at a lot of things from the transcript. Then outside of that, there is, I want to say, an AI battle, and I don't know how I feel about this with some top AI company and Nvidia, and a lot of kind of this GPU export restrictions and a lot of news dealing with that. So let's take a closer look in today's episode.
I want to thank the Motley Fool for sponsoring this video, and check out fool.com/Jose for the 10 best stocks to buy now. With that link, you get a promotional offer for the subscription service. Now, let's continue with today's episode.
All right, first we can see Nvidia for the day is down roughly 0.46% after hours. I'm going to say Amazon, the stock is down roughly 3.2%. They didn't really share too much bullish sentiment in the AI space, in my opinion, from what would cause maybe Nvidia to see a nice price increase after hours. There were some bullish takes, and again, we're going to look at that, but I don't think it was anything as bullish as what we saw yesterday from Meta and Microsoft. So I think that might be something that the market might be a little bit worried about. Overall, bullish thesis obviously still intact. So first, AWS grew 17% year over year in quarter one and now sits at $117 billion annualized revenue run rate. That's amazing amount of money coming here from AWS. Now, again, I said there's not a lot of short-term bullish growth stuff from Amazon, but there is one very bullish long-term, in my opinion, for just the semiconductor space, especially for kind of the data center providers. Andrew Jassy, the CEO of Amazon, mentioned that it's useful to remember that more than 85% of the global IT spend is still on-premise, so not in the cloud yet. It seems pretty straightforward to me that this equation will flip in the next 10 to 20 years. So this is kind of just indicating that this cloud market is still very much in its early infancy. And this is obviously very bullish for providers or chips that provide chips for the semiconductor cloud industry, I mean. So this is a nice long-term tailwind for companies like Nvidia. Before this generation of AI, they thought that AWS had a chance to ultimately be a multi-hundred billion dollar revenue run rate. We now think that it could be even larger. And if you believe your mission is to make customers' life easier and better every day, and you believe that every customer experience will be reinvented with AI, you're going to invest very aggressively in AI. And that's what Amazon is doing. You can see that with the 1,000+ AI applications they're building across Amazon. You can see that with their next generation of Alexa, named Alexa Plus. And hopefully they didn't just turn on your Alexa, but you can also see that is how they're using their AI in fulfillment network, robotics, shopping, Prime Video, and advertisement experience. So Andrew, in my opinion, the Amazon CEO, just gave this amazing bullish reason for Nvidia and for the semiconductor industry, because we are still very much in the early innings of the cloud. And then you have all these other growth opportunities, like we saw kind of that recommendation system that Meta talked about with their video and advertising experience and shopping experience. We can also see how AI is being used for the fulfillment network and for shopping, and then how AI can also improve the robotics market. So again, this was a very great take to kind of the bullish long term. Now, I want to say Amazon, in my opinion, is getting a little cocky for my taste. They're talking a lot about their Trainium 2 chip, which I'm pretty sure if an analyst was to ask what's the actual kind, and I wish we could get that right. I wish an analyst would say, so what's the kind of usage of your Trainium 2 chips versus Nvidia chips, right? Or some of these other chips. Is it really noticeable? But right now, they're obviously propping up their Trainium 2 chip, and maybe the market for Nvidia was not helpful. And they mentioned that they are increasing to see larger quantities with significant appeal and demand. Customers doing AI at any significant scale realize that it can get expensive very quickly. So the 30 to 40% better price performance that Trainium 2 offers versus other GPU-based instances is compelling. For AI to be as successful as we believe it can be, the price of inference needs to come down significantly. Again, I don't know if Andrew is just trying to showcase that there is some truth with them inventing this Trainium 2 and kind of building it up, But I wonder if next time this year or same time next year, if Andrew would be talking similarly when we see the Rubin platform, right? I think Nvidia is just accelerating so quickly. So it's interesting to see. Obviously, you have to do it, but even Google doesn't talk up their TPUs as much as Andrew is talking up their Trainium 2, and the TPU is a way better chip than the Trainium 2. So I think maybe the market was not so happy. Again, I think Amazon is getting a little too cocky, and I feel like they've always been a little bit iffy with that partnership and how they handle some of the partnerships that they're with. Now, the senior vice president and CFO mentioned that during the first quarter, they continue to see growth both in generative AI business and non-generative AI offerings as companies turn their attention to newer initiatives, bring more workloads to the cloud, restart or accelerate existing migrations from on-premise to the cloud, and tap into the power of generative AI. So the CFO again is telling us that there's strong demand for cloud and AI solutions. Now the final kind of thing I have here from Amazon earnings is that Andrew Jesse will tell us that the AI business right now is a multi-billion-dollar annual run rate business that's growing triple-digit percentage year over year. And as fast as they're putting up capacity, it's being consumed. Now, they have a lot more Trainium 2 instances, and the next generation of NVIDIA instances are landing in the coming months. So right now, we can definitely see how the AI space is still pretty strong in the short term of things. I do believe this was very bullish for the short term of Nvidia, but nothing as crazy of what we heard from some of the other players. So again, Amazon's earnings, in my opinion, bullish for the long term. It gave us a really good picture of how this story can grow dramatically, even from where we're at right now, especially since such a small amount of kind of spending is being used in the cloud. A lot is still done on premise. Now, the next thing I want to take a closer look at is Nvidia has been in a lot of talks recently, especially with the DeepSeek and Huawei. We saw that Jensen yesterday was at the White House and kind of talked about how he was going to build chips here in the United States and supercomputers. But one senior staff of Nvidia said the following: if DeepSeek R1 had been trained on Huawei chips, or a future open source Chinese model had been trained to be highly optimized to Huawei chips, that would risk creating a global market demand for Huawei chips. So this is kind of Nvidia trying to fight off this narrative that we should have export restrictions. The reason and the thing that they're saying is, look, if some amazing DeepSeek or AI model comes out from China and is optimized on a China chip, not only China will buy the Huawei chips, but the rest of the market will start saying, "Hey, look, this is actually a pretty good chip. We're going to start moving into those Chinese companies, right?" So obviously that would be bad for Nvidia, but in theory it would also be bad for the United States, right? Because Nvidia is a U.S.-based company, and you want to kind of promote that U.S. technology, as obviously you can get a lot of money coming in forms of taxes and everything else that would do if you have a successful U.S. business. But if you start to kind of limit the exposure of one and you create a competition, now that world dollars that was coming from another country and entering to the United States for NVIDIA chips are now going to go to the Chinese market instead and prompt up the Chinese economy, right? So that's the point NVIDIA is trying to make, that if you limit us too much, it's going to be very bad, not just for Nvidia, but it's also going to create this kind of ecosystem outside of the US base and go into other countries. Now, there are other reports. This one's pretty interesting. For those that are not familiar, there is a U.S. restriction law called the diffusion AI law that came from the Trump administration. And this AI diffusion rule was kind of put on pause. It's set to take in effect actually on May 15th. And right now, the current administration hasn't really made any changes. Now, America has some American-based companies like Nvidia, Oracle, Microsoft, and some other players have actually gone against this and say that this is going to create a scenario where you're going to force other countries to go to Chinese technology instead of U.S. technology. Now, the U.S. government is kind of asking for comments from a lot of AI players. And there is a company called Anthropic that did recently share their position on the diffusion rule. And NVIDIA did not like this. And to me, this is pretty interesting, right? Because Anthropic is a company that Amazon is investing in, and it's also a company that is using the tranium 2 chip. So is there an alternative motive here? I don't know, but let's see what they mention. I have a highlight. I have some things highlighted. So first, there are recommendations in several key factors. First, compute advantage is critical. So right now they're mentioning that the US chip technology is growing at rapid levels. And right now, maybe China might be kind of intact with us. The growing efficiency gap means that by 2027, countries using older chips could face AI training costs that are 10 times higher than those with cutting edge American technology. So Anthropic is saying, sure, maybe right now export restrictions are not working, but if we keep advancing AI chip technology at such a rapid level, which Nvidia is doing, by 2027, these kind of Chinese based or other older chips will be so much more expensive than American technology. So on the short term, it might not work. In the long term, there is a lot of opportunity for kind of having these restrictions to be very successful. They also mentioned that DeepSeek shows that controls work. Chinese AI companies like DeepSeek openly acknowledge that the chip restrictions are their primary constraint, requiring them to use 2 to 4 times more power to achieve similar results to US companies. Now, I do want to say that one thing is the China market and the China infrastructure has a lot more available electrical power compared to the United States because they're willing to turn on anything to draw some power, right? So they don't have a lot of hurdles to turn on some of the electrical capacity. So for them, just if they're able to provide the same amount of performance by using more power, it's not really too much of a hurdle for them. Now, they also meant that chip smuggling is a major threat. China has established sophisticated smuggling operations with documented cases involving hundreds of millions worth of chips. In some cases, smugglers have employed creative methods to circumvent export controls, including hiding processors in prosthetic baby bumps and packaging GPUs alongside live lobsters. Chinese firms continue to establish shell companies in third countries at a rapid pace to evade export controls. Now, this is when things started to get fishy. No pun intended, because we saw lobsters, and obviously lobsters live in the sea, so fishy. Okay, I had to bring the pun there. But it seems like they were in a full attack mode when they say that. They say, look, chip smuggling is true, and these are some documented cases. Tom's Hardware actually kind of showcased those documented cases, and these documented cases are very, very, I want to say, not directed to Nvidia's AI chips, right? I mean, kind of the baby bumps. We see that smuggler hit over 200 Alder Lake CPUs in fake silicon belly. Again, these are CPUs. CPUs are so much molar. You can't do that with kind of these H100s and massive AI GPUs. So it's really weird that Anthropic is kind of throwing this shade at Nvidia. And again, Anthropic is one that Amazon is investing. I wonder if there's going to be some drama between Nvidia and Amazon in the future. I'm not liking that for Amazon right now. The second one was kind of these GPUs that were hit with live lobsters. That was true in 2023, but it was for some really old GPUs. The GPUs were for something called the Quadro K220 cards that were pretty old. And again, nothing to be with AI GPUs either. So to me, again, it seems like Anthropic has some other motives. Now, they did have some recommendations to strengthen the rule in 3 key areas, and I actually agreed with some of them. They mentioned adjusting the tiering system, which suggested allowing countries in Tier 2 with robust data center security to obtain more chips through government-to-government agreements. So again, they're saying, sure, Tier 2 countries can have more and more chips. But they do want to mention that for the no license, if you kind of only purchase 1,700 NVIDIA chips, you don't need government permission. Now, they mentioned this could actually create a loophole for smuggling, so they want to reduce that even smaller, make it 1,000, make it 700, to reduce the ability of any form of smuggling of H100 chips. And then they also mentioned increased funding for export enforcement. So export controls are only effective with proper enforcement. I want to say those make sense to me, and if the current administration does that, I don't think that's necessarily the worst thing. So again, I don't think this would have been a bad thing if they would have ignored or never put that chip smuggling is a major threat. Everything anybody does is always for a reason and always to do something. What was the actual purpose of this? I think this had no real purpose to be in here, and I would say Anthropic maybe is in some trouble with Nvidia in the future. Now we do have to wait, as this is the implementation date is gonna be May 15th. That is a few days from now, about 2 weeks from now. So we're gonna have to wait and see what happens. But an Nvidia spokesperson mentioned the following: American firms should focus on innovation and rise to the challenge, rather than tell tales that large, heavy, and sensitive electronics are somehow smuggled in baby bumps or alongside live lobsters, a spokesperson for Nvidia said. Again, you're running a massive AI company, and you believe that these massive H100 Blackwell platforms are being shipped in these types of ways? There was no need for that, and for that reason, Anthropic has, which doesn't matter, lost kind of some of my respect here. Then outside of that, what else do we have here? Jensen does mention that he believes China is not behind in the AI race. They're actually pretty close. And Semi-Analysis, a very popular semiconductor research group, has actually said the same thing. They've actually talked about it in previously, where Huawei's AI cluster matrix, the 384, is China's answers to Nvidia's GB200 NVL72 system. So it is true what we're seeing. It's Jensen is not the only one. We've seen some research groups saying that China is actually right there with their own production. There are some payoffs, right? Like I mentioned, it's a lot more power hungry, which is not necessarily the best case for a world solution. But when you're limited and you can only do that in China, China has the answer. So I wouldn't say China in the AI chip is that far behind us. And the final thing we have here is there were reports that US weighs easing Nvidia chip curbs to UAE as Trump plans a visit overseas. So this is interesting, right? Obviously, this would be kind of an easement in restrictions. Right now, the UAE and other Gulf nations since 2023 have required some form of license to export NVIDIA chips. If this is true, we can see how kind of maybe the current administration is going to use NVIDIA's chips as a trading assets. And again, that's only possible because NVIDIA is so great. So I hope I shared some thoughts today. Again, nothing too bullish in my opinion from Amazon in the short term, but definitely a nice amount of tailwinds opportunities in the long term. Take care, have a good day, and see you all next time.